We need to have an honest conversation about cholesterol that might challenge what you've heard from diet evangelists. Recent intermittent fasting studies showed no improvement in cholesterol levels despite weight loss, and while that's disappointing if you hoped fasting was a cholesterol cure, it actually reveals something important about lipid metabolism that everyone should understand. Cholesterol is far more complex than simple dietary interventions can address, and pretending otherwise sets people up for disappointment and potentially dangerous misunderstanding of their cardiovascular risk. Let's start with genetics. Your liver produces most of your cholesterol. Dietary cholesterol has relatively modest effects for most people. How efficiently your liver produces cholesterol, how effectively your body clears LDL particles from the bloodstream, how your body regulates cholesterol synthesis and transport, these processes are heavily influenced by genes. Some people have genetic variants that make them hyperresponders to dietary changes. Others have variants like familial hypercholesterolemia, where no amount of dietary modification will bring cholesterol to safe levels without medication. The APO genotype is particularly important and underappreciated. Different APO variants respond differently to dietary fat. Some people's cholesterol shoots up with saturated fat intake, others barely respond. If you have certain APO variants and you're doing intermittent fasting while eating high saturated fat foods during your eating window, your cholesterol might actually worsen. But you'd never know this without genetic testing, and most people don't even know APO genotyping is available. Here's another complexity. LDL cholesterol, the so-called bad cholesterol, isn't actually a single entity. LDL particles vary in size and density. Small, dense LDL particles are more atherogenic, more likely to contribute to plaque formation than large, fluffy LDL particles. Standard cholesterol panels don't distinguish between these. You could have a total LDL number that looks okay, but have mostly small, dense particles and be at higher risk than your basic numbers suggest. Advanced lipid testing can reveal this, but it's not routine. Then there's oxidized LDL and Lp(a), lipoprotein(a). These are independent risk factors that dietary interventions don't significantly affect. Lp(a) is almost entirely genetically determined. If you have elevated Lp(a), which affects about 20% of people, diet changes, including intermittent fasting, are unlikely to budget. You'd need to know about this specific risk factor, which again requires testing beyond standard lipid panels, and address it through other means, including potentially specific medications. The triglyceride to HDL ratio might be more informative than total cholesterol for metabolic health. You can have acceptable total cholesterol but unfavorable ratios indicating insulin resistance and metabolic dysfunction. Conversely, some people have elevated LDL but very high HDL and low triglycerides, suggesting their metabolic health is actually quite good despite the LDL number. Context matters enormously. Inflammation is intimately connected to cardiovascular risk. High-sensitivity C-reactive protein, other markers of chronic inflammation, these might better predict heart disease risk than cholesterol alone. Someone with perfect cholesterol but chronic inflammation might be at higher risk than someone with modestly elevated cholesterol but low inflammation. Time-restricted eating might reduce inflammation for some people even without changing cholesterol, which could still provide cardiovascular benefit not captured by lipid measurements. Here's what frustrates me about how cholesterol is discussed in diet communities. There's this assumption that if you just find the right eating pattern, you can optimize your numbers without medical intervention. For some lucky individuals with responsive genetics and mild dyslipidemia, that's true. But for many people, especially those with strong family histories of heart disease or genetic predispositions, diet alone isn't sufficient. This isn't a personal failure. It's biology. Pretending otherwise leads people to blame themselves for lipid profiles that were never going to respond adequately to lifestyle modification alone. The evidence-based approach to cholesterol management needs to be individualized. For some people, intermittent fasting combined with saturated fat reduction, Increased soluble fiber, regular exercise, and stress management might adequately control lipids. For others, statins or other medications are necessary tools. There's no shame in pharmacological intervention when genetics stack the deck against you. The goal is cardiovascular health, not proving you can manage everything through diet. If intermittent fasting doesn't improve your cholesterol, that doesn't mean it's failed or that you've done something wrong. It might mean your cholesterol is driven by factors that meal timing doesn't significantly influence. Get comprehensive testing, understand your genetic risk factors if possible, work with a healthcare provider who understands the nuance of lipid metabolism, and be open to multiple interventions, including medication if needed. Your cardiovascular system deserves evidence-based care, not ideological dietary purity.